Personal story segment tonight. The anti-war movement in America remains tiny, and the most attention-getting part of it is Code Pink, starring Cindy Sheehan. Somebody's got to be giving her money. Do you know who it is?
Now, I don't know where Cindy Sheehan gets her money from. Maybe she gets speaking fees. Maybe there's money that's not declared. I have no idea. I'm just speculating.
This whole idea of her taking on Nancy Pelosi is a long stretch.
We didn't find where Cindy Sheehan's money was coming from specifically.
Nobody wants to be really associated with this kind of a radical situation.
Well, that's right.
Okay, they're going to have to be audited by the IRS, and the IRS has got to be looking at Ms. Sheehan.
Cindy Sheehan wants the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to move to impeach President Bush or else.
I've always said that impeachment is off the table.
She's furious with Nancy Pelosi.
And I want Congress to impeach George Bush and Dick Cheney.
But this whole idea of her taking on Nancy Pelosi is a long stretch.
An emotionally fragile Cindy Sheehan.
She's not likely to be knocked off by Cindy Sheehan or anybody else anytime soon.
I don't think the doctors ought to allow her to run because it's clearly not good for her.
It's clearly a candidacy of symbolism for Cindy Sheehan. I think she's kind of taken on the wrong person.
Cindy Sheehan.
She's not going to take on Cindy Sheehan.
Right.
There's no reason why she should.
Yeah, very funny.
Well, let me ask you about impeachment. What is the ground
For authorizing torture, spying on Americans without due process, the lies, deceptions that led to an illegal and immoral occupation of Iraq that has led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. I would say breaking the FISA laws by spying on Americans without warrants that George Bush admitted to, and for detaining human beings without due process, inadequate and tragic response to Katrina. I would say for authorizing torture. I would say for consolidating executive power, all the power in one branch, and I think that there are many grounds that impeachment could be started on.
Georgetown University law professor Jonathan Turley.
The thing that is ticking here in terms of a clock is the fact that these 14 guys that were recently transferred just arrived not that long ago in Gitmo in Cuba. They are going to be or have been interviewed by the Red Cross. Most people believe that they will reveal that they were subject to waterboarding, that where you are held underwater until you think that you're going to drown. That is undeniably torture under the international standard. If that occurs in the coming days, the United States, and specifically the President, will be accused of committing a very serious violation of international law. Torture is one of the top 3 or 4 things that the international law is designed to prevent.
But the Justice Department, under former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, secretly authorized some of the harshest interrogation techniques ever used by the CIA. The White House says the U.S. is working within the law.
If there were an attack on this country, all of the questions in here would be very different. You would be asking me, how did you allow this to happen? And what I am telling you is that within the law, we are making sure we are doing everything we can to prevent it from happening again.
In February of 2005, that a secret opinion was issued in which some of the harshest interrogation techniques, according to the New York Times, would be allowed. Techniques such as simulating drowning, as well as exposure to frigid temperatures and head slapping. Now, at the White House briefing today, the press secretary did not deny that there was this separate memo, but she did not reveal the contents of it and says she can't talk about any interrogation techniques other than to say that the U.S. policy has not changed. She said that the policy remains the U.S. is against torture. It's something the President has not authorized and will not authorize. So we're not getting any more clarification from the White House what is going on.
And so the reason there's this move to try to get legislation as fast as possible is because I think the administration senses that there's a lot of trouble coming down this mountain. But remember, the President stands accused of 30 felonies in the NSA controversy. Many of us believe he committed felony crimes there. If now he's going to be accused of intentionally and knowingly ordering serious violations of international law, it's not going to go well for the United States. We're already viewed as a rogue nation around the world. But here's something the President most likely knew about and condoned.
And people have no idea how significant this is, what really a time of shame this is for the American system. What the Congress did and what the President signed today essentially revokes over 200 years of American principles and values.
Would you agree a Dunkin' water is a no-brainer if it can save lives?
Well, it's a no-brainer for me, but for a while there I was criticized as being the vice president for torture. We don't torture.
The United States has engaged in torture. The administration has already established that it has engaged in things like waterboarding, which is not just torture. We prosecuted people after World War II for waterboarding prisoners. We treated it as a war crime. And my God, what a change of faith, where we are now embracing the very thing that we once prosecuted people for. Who are we now? I know who we were then. But when the president said that we don't torture, that was frankly when I had to turn off my TV set. But the real check and balance for this type of thing rests with Congress. And Congress has done nothing. Do you realize that Congress has not even held a substantive investigation of the NSA operation? An operation that most of us believe was criminal, that the federal law defines quite clearly as a federal crime. Now, instead of investigating that, the Congress actually gave the president a standing ovation during the State of the Union speech when he promised to continue to violate that law. When he said he would continue this program. And the people who were responsible for passing the law that he was violating gave him a standing ovation. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life.
I've always said that impeachment is off the table.
I've always said that impeachment is off the table.
The latest poll from Newsweek showing that should they win, those who voted for them will be expecting a return on their voting investment. More than half still wanting the Democrats to take control of Congress, compared with less than a third hoping the same for Republicans. Should the Democrats win control, 51% of those surveyed of both parties favoring impeachment. But elsewhere in Newsweek, the Democratic House leader, Nancy Pelosi, said to the magazine, in effect, as she did on 60 Minutes last night, that impeachment would not happen on her watch. Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader, and her voting record on domestic spying programs, on the Patriot Act, is that an issue attack against Pelosi, or is it a gender-specific attack against Pelosi?
You know what? I just happen to believe that if John Murtha was about to be Speaker in a Democratic House, or Steny Hoyer was about to be Speaker in a Democratic House, that they would be the boogeyman as well.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
You know, Democrats won control of Congress last fall, dismissing any talks of moves to impeach the president.
You might call it the I word, the one that just won't go away. Impeachment.
I want to say this for our listeners. They want impeachment put back on the table.
Is impeachment really on the table? Democratic leaders say no. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it back in November.
I have said, and I say again, that impeachment is off the table.
And she reiterated that to CNN this week. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's office told us that it's not anything that Senator Reid could support, nor is it under consideration. And besides, the whole idea that Vice President Cheney would become the next president is a nightmare too horrible to contemplate. If congressional leaders say impeachment proceedings will not happen under their watch, why bring it up?
When you hear Democrats talk about impeachment, it really is red meat rhetoric to really appease the base that is very frustrated that the fact that U.S. troops are still in Iraq, that U.S. soldiers are dying.
Political observers say as much as the Democratic base wants to hear the I word, trying to impeach the president would be a bad political move.
And strategically, Democratic leaders realized that impeaching President Bush would actually hurt them in 2008. They would look partisan, they would look petty.
Now, as for that race for president next year, the only candidates really pushing for impeachment are former Senator Mike Gravel and Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who this year introduced articles for impeaching not the president, but Vice President Cheney, to avoid that scenario that Senator Reid's office called a nightmare too horrible to contemplate, Miles.
So all of this could be political posturing, as much is in this town, but it also could very easily backfire on Democrats. People could perceive it as just what they were saying in the piece here, that it's petty.
They clearly could, and it's a very delicate balance they have to walk.
Nancy Pelosi, meet your replacement, Cindy Sheehan.